Woo! We are live. Welcome, 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 everyone. We're so excited to be here. We are live tonight for a pop-up book release with Dr. C.C. Covington herself, the number one best-selling author with a new release on this evening. So we're so excited to be here. We're want y'all to come in and join us to hear about the book, see what she's talking about in the book, hear a little bit about her process, learn a little bit more about her, and support her. Support her by going to get the book. So welcome, welcome, welcome. We're letting everybody come in. Welcome in. Please say hello as you enter so we'll know you're here. This is a pop-up book release tonight for a new book by Dr. Char-shenda Covington. It's about leadership. So please, please, please share out, get the people in the room. Anybody that you know that has a heart for leadership, right? If they have a heart for leadership, please, please, please get them in the room. Get them in the room. They have a heart for leadership. So we're going to get Dr. CC back up here. Here we go. Hey, Dr. CC.
Hello. Please excuse the interruption.
All right, y'all. Welcome in. Please share out. Dr. CC has released her second book, her first solo project, but her second book. And we just want to talk about leadership a little bit on this evening. You know, we're in the state of Georgia. And Georgia got some real important things happening right now. So I know many people are glued to the TV. But if you have your device in your hand and you're scrolling, and you happen to run up on this particular broadcast, we ask that you share it out because leadership is important. And what Dr. Covington has released from her heart is what the world needs right now. So hello, welcome in. Say hello so we'll know that you're here. We're excited. We're going to talk about leadership. She's going to share some of her heart and what she released in the book. We're going to ask you to support her on this release. She has been grinding, getting this word out about leadership. The name of the book is The ABCs of Leadership, a leader's prayer journal to success and peace of mind. Now, we're in a pandemic, and she's going to tell you more about that. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce Dr. Char-shenda Covington, affectionately known as Dr. CC, and let her tell you a little bit more about who she is. And then we're going to have a really authentic, free-flowing discussion about what God has ordained her to do with this particular project. Dr. CC.
Hello, everyone. Thank you guys so much for joining. I am Char-shenda Covington, but of course, Dr. CC works for me. And I am super excited to share with you guys in this space. This is my heart's work. I started this journey over 3 years ago. Special shout out to Dr. Craig. She made sure that I finished the process. And we'll talk a little bit more about that throughout the session, but I'm super grateful to be here. I want to let everybody know, though I'm an educator, it's not only about leadership in education, it's leading in your household, leading in the marketing field, wherever you're leading, whatever you're leading, this book is the book for you in order to do that and lead spiritually well. So I am going to, I guess, just go ahead and give you a little background about myself. I like CC, so I'm not going to do Char-shenda Covington again, okay? But I am currently a principal in the Metro Atlanta area. I've done school improvement work. I'm a mommy. That's most important. I'm a mommy. I'm an only child, so that's important. Because I think as I'm telling you this, I'm a divorcee. I'm a single mom. All of that factors into why this book was written and how it was written. And I'm also first generation. So I do have an EDD in ed leadership with the focus on school or organizational leadership with the focus on school improvement and a PhD in educational leadership. That's also critical to understand my work. So again, special shout out to everybody that's joining, that's here watching. Special shout out to Dr. Craig for always pushing me and motivating me to get it done. And so I guess we will go ahead and get started. I won't necessarily read to you the book, but I do think it's important, especially for those of you that have not gone out and got your copies yet. Feel free to click on Amazon on your other device Because we're in this virtual space, everybody now has two devices. But I do want to walk you through what the ABCs stand for. And as you guys are chiming in, if you have a question about a particular letter, please let me know and we'll go there.
Dr. CC, real
Yeah.
quick, I have to cut you off, but before you go into ABCs, can you just give a little background as to how you even ended up writing this book? Because I know you just released one not too long ago, but what got you to the point of this book?
So I would have to be super honest and just say life's experiences. It wasn't one thing, but for me, being first generation, being a single mom, being a young leader, my first leadership role, I started teaching at 21. By the time I turned 22, I was a department chair. So coming from the lens of serving others, but wanting to serve others well, I think that was it wasn't a disconnect, but I needed more work. And so I'm super reflective. I love to tell people I know, what I don't, I want to know. So as knowledgeable as I am, I always want to be better. And so it came from a place of deep reflection. And I started this work 3 years ago, but it wasn't until I did a staycation that was kind of sort of forced upon me that I was able to separate myself from what was going on to get it done. But I will also say that had I finished this book 3 years ago when I initially started, the content wouldn't have been ready. Like I had to have more life experiences. I had to go through some things. Our elders, I would say, live a little bit. So I had to have a couple of more experiences, and I'm super, super grateful. I always tell people it's not that I don't fail. I just don't want to fail again the same way. So there are a lot of my failures discussed in this book. I'm super transparent. If there's any one word for people to use to describe me, authentic is definitely it. I don't know how to be anybody else. And even when I'm wrong, or if I say something I'm not supposed to, I'll own and say I shouldn't have said it, but I meant it. So it's just a lot of that, the growing in grace, which is also referenced in the book. But in order to grow in grace, you have to go through some things. You have to maneuver through some things. You have to be set down a couple of times. So that's essentially what this book was about. And it's basically my journey from whatever the role was. Titles don't matter to me. Fulfilling my purpose does. And so, and going through a lot of these sections in the book, it's literally, and it's not a hard read. It's not a long read. It's right to the point. But my experiences were real. And I think for me to share it in this space, you won't necessarily see my vulnerability while I'm trying to move the mountain. And so this is a tell-all in regards to the mistakes I've made, the growth that I've experienced, and the growth that I still have to experience, because I'm not there yet. I love when I'm talking to my friends and mentors, and they're like, "You're doing so well." And I'm like, but I'm not done. I don't feel like I've touched the surface yet. So if I can help anybody to join me as I build or get to the top, I'm here for it. So
Yes.
thank you for that, Dr. Craig.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, look, Dr. Walker reminded us last on December the 18th, I think it was, or the 21st, that the work is not in vain, it's in your veins. And this
Absolutely.
particular literary work is straight from your veins, straight from your pumping heart. So anybody that's here, please say hello. Let us know what leadership is to you. Share this broadcast out. Support this wonderful Delta woman on this evening, this extraordinary leader on this evening, as she shares her heart and gives you an introduction to her book. So with that, I'm going to be quiet and let you sort of break down your ABCs of leadership.
Okay, so again, I want to make sure, because we're literally just going from whoever engages with us. So I don't want you to think that we have anything set other than just sharing the work, sharing my passion, sharing my struggles. And so what I will share are the ABCs again. And again, let me know if it's something you want me to chime in on. So the A stands for adaptability. B, building meaningful relationships. Compassion, distant presence, eliminating barriers, flexibility, grace and grind, hope, intentionality, joy, kind, leading with confidence, modeling the expectation, new partnerships, optimism, plan, over plan, and replanning for P. Q is quieting yourself, risk, stability, trust, understanding, being vocal and visible, well-being, yeah, Xeroxing everything. And so, of course, I had to get creative with the X, right? So Xeroxing everything that works and Xing everything out that does not work. Yearning for brighter days and being zealous in your approach. And so those are the ABCs. And so what I like to do is just start with the ones that are my absolute favorite. All of them are different parts of me, but just to start the conversation or start the thinking process. So I'll start with trust. Trust, and I will share the scripture, and I won't share all of them, but I'll definitely share that one because that was the anchor for me. As you are leading, as you are learning, as you are growing in grace, as we like to say, there has to be trust. And so Isaiah 41:10 states, "So do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous hand." And so for me, trust is one of those leadership qualities that you can't buy. You have to earn it. If you're whomever you're leading, if your child doesn't trust that dinner is going to be on the stove at 7 o'clock, that's the problem. So trust is one of those characteristics that's earned, but it's a non-negotiable to be an effective leader because it's not about being a leader. It's about being effective because you're not necessarily a leader if nobody's following you, right? And so you have to build that trust. And so one of the things I share with a lot of my colleagues in my current setting, my first year was probably my most difficult year. This is my 15th year in education, my 10th year in leadership, but year number 8 in leadership was a challenge. And so I felt like my supervisor worked in my building. Like they had keys to my office. We shared the same purse space. That's how real it was at the Rock. And so what I will say is that one of the things she left me with was trust my leadership. And anybody knows me in my current situation, they know I absolutely love. She's been recently promoted, but they know that I absolutely love my supervisor, even when I was redirected. And that's a nugget in itself. A lot of people love when people only praise them. The reason that I could embrace my supervisor's redirection of me is because I knew she knew who I was as a person. She knew who I was as a leader, but more importantly, she knew who I was as a child of God. That's not something you can purchase. That's not something you see on a resume. That had to be established, and it started with discernment. And so that's another thing that's critical in leadership. You have to look beyond what you see. You have to listen with your eyes and your ears. You have to be in tune with who called you. Because even though we applied for these jobs, God got us to the table. Beyond getting to the table, he got us the first check with that title on it. Okay, so that's one of those things you have to be mindful of why you're in the place. And so one of the things that I highlighted, and I read this book every other day, like because I still need it, right? But it says God entrusts you with his people. Why shouldn't you trust him with the work he has called you to do? And so sometimes I was the overachiever in my group, right? Always trying to be first. And it wasn't to outshow other people, it was to do my work well. And if I could do it first, so be it. And so what I had to learn was not always having to defend myself. Because if I'm doing the work of God, there will always be a need to defend, but it doesn't necessarily have to come from me. And so I had to trust God and his trusting me of doing his work. Now that's the word in itself, because how do you step back like you know what you're called to do? You know that it's time to do it, but you still have to yield to the leadership. And that may be in a person or it may be in a word. There are plenty of times where I just said, let me go in my office, cut on my I told a storm, lock my door, cut the light off so people won't know that I'm here, even though they can still see my car, and just get into the word. And it's okay. And at some point in your leadership journey, you could do it at your house. Maybe the kids are not doing their homework. They're not turning in assignments. You have to separate yourself. And I think that goes into the quieting yourself. I'm not going to talk about Q, but just getting to a place where you can stop, release, and relax. And so I mentioned in Compassion in the book that I literally had to have a staycation to finish writing a book. And not only did I finish writing in a weekend, one of my mentors, mentees, he actually hired me a chef, hired me a meditation specialist, hired me a massage therapist. And his thinking was, let me hurry up and schedule all of this because you don't allow people to do things for you. And so that goes into the self-care. He was like, you never take time for yourself. So let me just take care of you and let me hurry up because I know you, if it's on your schedule, you're not going to let it not happen. And so when you're talking about the trust, that goes multiple ways. Like I have to trust my team to do what it is that I've asked them to do. That was a struggle for me. I didn't use D for delegation, but that was one of my greatest challenges in leadership. I'm better today than I was yesterday, but it was a journey. And I think if I'm being super honest, if we're talking about in leadership capacities, it wasn't until 8 years into leadership that I finally got it, that I was finally able to release the work. And in the event that they fail with what my expectations were, they have to fail for it because failure is not an option. Maybe you fail the first time, but you won't fail the same way. Those were my expectations. And so in the book, I talk about modeling the expectation. And so when you're thinking about those challenging people that you work with, those challenging customers or clients, they are still God's children. So you have to center yourself in that way. So that was trust. So my second favorite part is distant presence. So that's one of the things that I made up. I'm good for making up words, making up concepts, but I can explain them though. So that helps with understanding them. But dealing with distant presence, I used Hebrews 13:5 as a reference. For he himself said, I will never leave you nor forsake you. We are currently in a pandemic. Whether we're talking about whether or not students are returning to a brick and mortar setting, if you're in Georgia, the race of the century is on your news channel, whether you like it or not. The people are probably still calling, and you're probably going to get 3 more mailings about going to vote today. It has been real. And so what I had to learn, my dream job, and I won't, well, actually I will because it's a part of the story. So one of the things, I had a praise break as I was developing this section. And what I basically said was your faith will sustain you. I remember back in 2011, 2012 school year, maybe July, August, I was in my classroom and my best friend was like, what are you doing? I said, well, I'm preparing my classroom. She was like, for what? I was like, oh, my new job. So I'm separating the stuff that I'm going to leave for the next teacher. And she was like, you didn't tell him you got a new job? I said, oh, I haven't. And she was like, okay, what am I missing? And I was like, nothing. I'm just getting prepared. I'm getting prepared for what's next for me. And she said, okay. So if you know my female best friend or male best friend, they both stand 10 toes down with me with whatever I'm going for, they're with it, whether they agree or not. And both of them will clearly articulate that they're not with me or they don't agree with me, but they're going to stand with me, right? And so she was like, okay, faith friend. And so when I went into education, because I never wanted to be an educator, but when I went into education, I said that I would only do 5 years in the classroom because I was meant to lead. I was built to lead. I was raised to lead. And so for me, everybody's like, no, you got to at least do 10 years. I was like, oh, okay. And so my faith sustained me. But what I always tell people is God had to remind me that he was still in control because I did 5.11 years in the classroom. And so people laugh, but I didn't get my first dream job until September. So of course you guys know in Georgia school starts in August. So needless to say, I get this dream job. So we're going to fast forward past that one and get to the next dream job because essentially all I want to do is be a principal. So I'm seeking to be a principal, but the job in between the classroom and the principalship was a school improvement consultancy. So I literally traveled the country. I served 14 states regularly. Best job in the world. But what I had to realize is, in that distant present, this is where I chime in with my child. I mentioned I'm a single mother. I have a 10-year-old. And so I'm out here changing the landscape of education. And some of my friends refer to me as the Olivia Pope of education. I was like, but wait, what about my child? Because see, I have to do homework with my child on FaceTime. And I said, oh, so I'm not going to be able to do this too long because I was hired to be the Georgia girl and Georgia became 14 states. And I said, okay, I have to commit to 3 years and leave. That was the first hardest walk away I had to do, but my child is worth it. Anybody that knows me knows that Sydney is my pride and joy. I would do it all over again. I probably would have quit sooner had I known what I know now. But the distant presence was a term I came up with. I had the best job in the land, so I thought. It was my first principalship. But the issue was I cried going to work every day and I cried going home every day. But guess what? When I was at work, I was all smiles. You would not know that I was absolutely struggling with everything that was in me to do the work that God called me to do. And so my leadership team at the time, they sent out an email to my staff. They sent the email out to my parents. Anybody that needed to know that I was leaving knew without my prior consent or knowledge. And so I'm in my office, my empty office, with the door closed. And one of my teacher barges in. He's like, "Did you think about us when you quit?" And of course, the true leader, when you haven't mentioned anything, you say, "What are you talking about?" And he's now in tears. And he was like, "You just quit. You didn't think about us." And I was like, okay. So first thing first, I cried my last tear about this job yesterday. So you missed that impact. Like, you should have came here yesterday to cry with me, because today you're not gonna get it. But what you can do is calm down, but understand I don't have to be present to be present. And so with that individual teacher and a couple of other ones that I still talk to this day, 6 years later, um, I review his lesson plans. I helped develop assessments. I helped develop projects. Like, he was an amazing educator, but I think his care or concern or love for me came because I challenged him. Like, he was one of the best teachers in that building, but it wasn't enough for me. Because when you're great, you expect greatness around you. Greatness is always the expectation. And so he was so bothered, and we still to this day, the same teacher that I referenced in that example was the same one that said, "Let me do your staycation for you." And so it came full circle. And so what he had to understand, and what I understood a little more as years went, as I know, right? Hey, Dr. TBJ. But what I learned in that moment was I can still fulfill God's purpose for my life in a different position, because I literally walked away from a 6-figure job, and I literally went to work that day. I was bawling. I'm talking about crying, an ugly cry. Anybody knows I'm a crybaby, but when you can't fix your hair type cry, it was a mess. And so I left work and drove about 45 minutes to my mom's job. And I said, "Hey, let's go to lunch." And she's looking nervous because I'm an only child. So, of course, she knows something wrong with her child. Mamas know. And so she said, "What is it?" I said, "I think I have to quit." And she said, "Oh, okay." And my mom is super vocal. And so for her to give me the simple okay, and she actually offered, she said, "Well, if you send your letter of resignation and you CC me, I'll give you a $10,000 check." And I said, "Well, Mom, I don't really want your money, because if mamas, they give you money, tell you how to spend the money, when to spend the money. I wasn't signing up for that. Because, yeah, that wasn't an option. I would have preferred to be broke, okay?" And so what I ended up doing, I said, "You know what, Mom, I'm going to look at all my accounts and figure it out." And so one of my retirement accounts, I literally pulled out what I made per month for the next 4 months for peace of mind. Now that I'm thinking about it, it probably wasn't the best idea for me financially, but when it came to my mental space, my social emotional space, I couldn't have done anything better other than leave sooner. Because I'm working in a space where my grandfather passed. They tell me I still gotta work. I go out of state to a conference, and they're all in the host hotel. I'm 10 blocks down, and they tell me I gotta walk to the sessions. Like, I can give you leaps and bounds of my experiences in that place. And what I had to realize then at that point in life is that my mental capacity is more important than anything. Because if I'm not good mentally, I'm not good for my child. I'm not good for those that I'm leading. And what was super disheartening is my mentee that I referenced a couple of times. He said, "Doc, nobody knew. You're always pouring into somebody, but you were pouring from an empty cup." And I was like, "Yeah, but the job has to get done though." And so that leads me to compassion. That's the last one that I'll highlight without question. Um, Compassion, and I'll give you the scripture. Be kind to one another, tenderhearted, one another as God in Christ in you. And that's Ephesians 4:32. And so with that one, what I had to realize is being viewed as a leader was different than being a leader. And so I had to do a lot of rethinking because I came in as a heavy hitter. Remember, at 21, I just came in as I'm a first year teacher, and now I'm a department chair. And so I'm super excited, and I started feeling myself. I did. And guess what? I fell forward real quick. It didn't take long because people were pushing back, not because my ideas weren't good, but because I wasn't listening to their ideas. And so for me, you can't lead a herd anywhere but nowhere if they're not following you. So it was one of those things where I had to really focus and say, why am I getting so much kickback? God, I'm doing what you called me to do. I'm literally doing what you asked me to do. Why am I losing? And I'm a winner. Like, I'm one of those people. I'm competitive by nature. Who can drink the smoothie first? I don't know. But that's literally, it doesn't take much to get me in a competitive stance. And so for me, I couldn't understand. And what I hate more than losing is processing failure. And so for me, I said, in order for me to lead well, I have to listen to people. I have to delegate. And I referenced that a little earlier because for me, I knew God called me to do what I was doing, but I wasn't doing it well. So for me, I was dishonoring God. And so I'm my hardest critic. I love the people around me that pour into me, but I'm like, but I still didn't do that part right. And they're like, can you just say thank you? So I'm working on that. But that compassion, and compassion is more than just treating people well, because I treat people well. Compassion is understanding that people don't think like you. People may not handle the situation the same as you, and understanding that it's not necessarily wrong because it wasn't your idea. It wasn't your belief. And so I had to literally grow in grace. And that took me a while. That's probably the best lesson I've learned. And one of my supervisors said, you got to work on your empathy. And I was like, I cry with everybody on my staff that cries. But as soon as we finish, the lesson plans are still due. Like, I'm confused. I I struggled, y'all, because I'm like, I don't get to tell you that because they broke their big toe that we didn't turn in our report that was due to you. She was like, you're correct, but you have to be empathetic. I said, well, I got to work on that and pray on that, because I don't know how it looks other than the deadline is still 4:00. And let's turn this in right quick and let's start back crying at 4:15 after we make sure they received it. So that compassion is deep. And so the question that I asked, and the way that the book is written, it gives you a scripture, it gives you an experience, and then it gives you a prayer. So if you're struggling with having compassion towards others, it gives you a prayer that you can say. And they're really simple, but they're really meaningful and intentional for what you're trying to address. And then there are 2 reflection questions that you can ask yourself. And you can either write in the book or write in a notebook. Like, sometimes I just go through and pull a notebook or do it on my cell phone, because I'm one of those people that writing it out helps it out. And so what activates your compassion? Because again, I'm, in my mind, one of the most caring individuals, but I have to make sure that those that I lead understand I care about your greatness. I care about you as a person, but it doesn't change the work of the organization that we're in. And so that's a nice balance. And that compassion also means having compassion for yourself, like that work-life balance. That's a struggle for me. I'm still not there yet. Like, I can be nice to everybody now, but I struggle with taking time for myself because, as I shared, I went on a weekend staycation, did amazing. But when I came back, it was back to business, back to running up, buying dance shoes, hair appointments, nail appointments. And those are self-care, but not when you're sitting there responding to emails. So as I was preparing for this call, I got an email from my school improvement coach, and she said, shouldn't you be preparing for your session? I said, I am, but I'm just finish this response right quick. So taking time out for yourself is also reflected in compassion, because you have to have compassion for yourself and the work that you do.
Yes. All right. So that was great, y'all. Just for those that are coming in, we're coming off of another book release event on Clubhouse, for those that are on Clubhouse. And we're here because we know everybody's not on Clubhouse. But Dr. Char-shenda sort of just, Dr. CC, she just shared how she set this book up, how it was birthed, how she even had to take a staycation to sit and write the manuscript to get it done because of the work balance and the personal balance, something that she had carried for years. She carried this book in her heart for years, but she also know that the timing was ordained because this is about leadership, the ABCs of leaders in leading during a pandemic. We're in something we haven't never been in before. And so when you go through this book, this is not just a book that you get. And by the way, if you're on Facebook, the link is pinned on there for you to go get the book and support her. This is a tool. And everybody is a leader. So though you hear her story and her testimony and you hear her talk about her leadership journey, you don't have to be a school leader, a principal, assistant. You don't have to be that to let this book be your tool. You can be a mommy. You can be a wife. You can be a husband. You can be a friend. Leadership is leadership is leadership. And if anybody is following you, you got to be attuned to yourself to understand who you are as a leader. And these ABCs will get you to that place because you can continually reflect on yourself. You can go to this space if you're having a hard time with trust. You can go get this tool off the bookcase or wherever you keep it. Read that prayer. Read those reflection questions to reset yourself, right? So this is a tool that everybody needs, no matter where you serve. And Dr. CC shared quite a few things. I want to hear from the audience. For those that are here, just give us a 1 in the comments if trust is a important leadership attribute for you. When you think about leadership, if you believe that trust is important, put a 1 in the comments. And as you do that, I want to share some of the comments, Dr. CC. We have Marie Johnson. Hey, Lady Marie, thank you for joining. She says, before you lead, you must have had to follow. Otherwise, when in the lead, you wouldn't know which way to go. What would you say to that comment, Dr. CC?
I would absolutely go back to that first leadership role I had in the educational setting. I was so excited that I was leading that I forgot how to follow. So Miss Marie couldn't have said it better because I learned quickly. And see, that's one thing, you're not going to get me for long. But that's one thing that I had to really process. And it wasn't that I was a poor follower. It's that when I thought in a leadership role at that time, because I'm 21, fresh out of Spelman. So I'm winning in my mind, even though I'm broke because first year teachers didn't make much. But I'm just saying, in my mind, I'm winning, right? But what I had to learn immediately is that if people don't feel valued in their work and valued in what they can provide, they won't work well for you. My current staff will move the mountain for me literally. And we're talking about 15 years later. So it took me a minute, but in that regard, I learned that lesson quickly because I knew that if I did it, I would continue to fail. I don't have a problem with failure. I have a problem with continuing to fail. And I tell my staff, I'm okay with you making a mistake. Just don't make the same one again, because that means you haven't learned. And any lesson unlearned will be repeated. And so for me, just making sure that as I'm learning, and I tell my staff, if it's something I don't know, that's not a strength of mine. You got to help me with that. What would you tell me if I were your 5-year-old? How would you explain that to me? Because sometimes we need to be simple. I love my vocabulary, but sometimes I have to go to 1 + 1 = 2 and just break it down in the simplistic form, because then you could also garner more people to lead. I won't even say followers. I'll just say more people to lead using that as the core.
And as I hear you talk, 2 stark things that I want to bring up here. You talk so freely, and I thank you for your authenticity and transparency about failing forward. And it's okay to fail. Like, 'cause so many people have an issue with failing, but you clearly show in your testimony here and what you wrote in the ABCs of leadership that you can identify where you messed up back then, and you can see how your staff responded to you up to today and how your staff responds to you. To me, that is invaluable. That's where there's no money to put on that, because a lot of leaders don't get on the internet in these streets and tell the truth about their failures as a leader. And I say thank you, because there's many people that are watching or will watch that, it probably will help them in their growth and in their journey to understand it's okay as long as I deal with me, right? As long as I dig into me to realize where my things are that I need to work on, right? Those things that I don't have, right? And over your 15 years, you're young. You're really young. God has called you to this thing, and I say thank you for your obedience at 21 to go into the classroom. Thank you for your obedience
It was
for
not my plan.
leaving the world. Like, the education profession needs you so much, and everybody needs you, because you're not done. Education is not where you're going to end. This is part of who you are, but you have so much other thing, many other things in you as well. So
I
you talk
received it.
about trust. I asked the question, who thought that trust was important? Put it in one of the comments, and we got Dr. TBJ. I believe she knows that trust is an important factor, right? Because she's a leader. Sister Marie, Lady Marie, sharing wisdom is required as well. We are required to grow in grace and knowledge spiritually to contend with the world. Amen, sister.
Yes. And the
Amen.
thing is, wisdom, a part of my definition of wisdom is just being quiet. I've had some very, very, very challenging leaders, to where there was a disruption to my spirit type challenging. Because see, you can't move me when it comes to my work. Like, I'm sorry. Like, I'm gonna study to show thyself approved every time. I may not get it the first time, but trust and believe I'm giving you an A before we move to the next one. But that being quiet, and just listening, I learned a lot. I learned a lot from leaders I didn't want to be like. Like, I had one person tell me that it was a problem with my smile, not my work ethic. I do everything I'm asked. I turn everything in on time, but you have an issue with my smile. To me, that's a malnutrition to my spirit, and I'll exit stage left. And so one of the things that I'm learning now, because this good baby and dance mom stuff I got going on, I got to work. And so what I've learned now is I have to plan my exit. And so when I'm talking about that plan, overplan, and replan, I was able to walk away from my first principal job because I had to look at all accounts, because I wanted the same check that I had when I was at work to restore my peace of mind. We talk about when we're saving money, they always say pay God and then pay yourself. Well, I didn't get into paying myself until I had no other choice. And my mom was like, girl, you broke. Why you buying computers? I was like, no. Not broke, underemployed is a better statement. But I had to plan for that. And so for me, I had to realize that I can't be unapologetic with how I move, as long as I'm following God's word for me and God's grace for me. It maybe nobody else in the world will understand, but as long as I'm clear that I heard a word from Him, I'm gonna move how I move, and I'm gonna be okay with whatever results. And that's that relentless faith. Like my pastor, shout out to Mount Nebo Baptist Church and Life Center. But my pastor preached about that a couple of weeks ago, if I'm not mistaken. Anybody knows me knows I take notes, and I really want to look on my phone and tell y'all the date, but it doesn't matter because you get the relentless faith hashtag. But that's one of the things that he talked about. Like, you got to have the type of faith that, whatever you do, if you're following God, you have to win, because His word can't come back void. And so in teaching my daughter that, in our last session, one of the participants asked the question, like, what would you give to your daughter from this book? That was the best question in the land for me, because I had to think about it. And what I shared with her was hope, because there's so much going on in the world. Like, my daughter woke up a week or so ago and she was like, Mommy, you got to take me to vote. I said, you have to be 18? She said, oh, they just said go vote early. And so I was super excited. But the fact that she knows that there is something disrupting America and she needs to have her voice out, that was most rewarding to me. And I'm like, I love her teacher, because my ex-husband and I both taught social studies, and my daughter has hated it since she started school at 2. But now she has a passion for social studies. And so for me, I'm happy. She was like, well, no. I said, well, what are the qualifications of vote? She was like, we didn't learn that part, but we know the qualifications to be a president. I said, okay, I'll take it. Okay. But the thing was that she knew, or she knows at the age of 10, that your voice matters.
Mm-hmm.
So that hope that this can turn around. The other thing is that I would share with a younger me or a child reading this book is compassion. Know how to treat people. Build meaningful relationships. I remember a couple of years ago, some little girl used to pull her hair every day. Now, of course, I hadn't started writing the ABC, so I hadn't graduated to this good understanding I have today. Because I'm not going to tell y'all what I told my child. But her dad told her, You don't need no friends. You got your mama and your daddy and your grandmamas. And I was like, that's not right. She does need friends. But, just how to treat other people and how to treat people well. Because one of the things that I mentioned earlier is that whether it's the disgruntled customer, the ill-equipped colleague, or the less than knowledgeable leader, they're still God's children. And so you will be held accountable. And so one of my mom's favorite statements is bring no harm to God's anointed. And it's so funny because she'll say quick. See, that's why I pray, because I don't want God to take nothing back he got from me. Like, I don't have problems with my cars, my house. So you can't mess with people. But you have to treat people kind, even those people that bring harm against you. Because we know that there are a lot of people that will lie on you. And that was my biggest issue going back to that trust thing. I had to trust, not that my supervisor would handle the situation or rectify the situation, but trust that her image of me wouldn't be tainted by what was coming up against me. Because they never said, no weapon formed against you will prosper. Not that they won't form, they just won't prosper. And I had to learn that. And that was one of my favorite scriptures growing up. But I had to learn that differently in that first year in that role. Because I used to ask, do they sit in the teacher's lounge and make up stuff? Like, let me help them. Some stuff that's a little more believable. Because some of the stuff they were coming up with, you ain't do that. Like, people that don't even like me would know that I don't do that. And my mom said, you have to understand that the people are not upset with you. They're upset with the God in you. Because you still win. And so it's been plenty of nights I call my mom, my best friends, just crying. I'm like, you know what? I ain't want to teach no way. Like, that was my favorite response. Maybe the first 8 years of my educational career, that was my favorite thing. I just wanted to be a child advocacy attorney. But what better way to advocate for children than in education? And so what I tell everybody is, I absolutely, absolutely love my job. I'm passionate about my work. I'm passionate about equity. I'm passionate about highlighting issues that deal with minority children, culturally relevant pedagogy, how legislations are written with us not in mind, highlighting the issues in education. Like, that's what I do. So I'm comfortable with being unapologetically authentic when I'm advocating for others. And I had to tell one of my teachers today, I'm going to support you in right, wrong, and indifferent in public, but we will have a closed-up conversation after I fix your last boo-boo. Because you're not making any more boo-boos. Because I'm in elementary land. Now, if they were middle and high school teachers, my approach would be a little different. But I had to tell the teachers, this your last mess up on this issue. And I think that's super important as well. And that's a sign of compassion, because I'm supporting you when you're wrong. And we both know you're wrong. Like, you knew you were wrong. You knew they were on the way to call me. You probably gave them my number because you knew you were that far out of order. But the other thing that I would say, and I didn't mention it in this book because it's going to be another series, but that forgiveness piece. One thing about my staff, some of those, I have I retained 94% of my staff this year. Last year, I had a 70% new staff. The year before that, 89% of my staff had been there 3 to 21 years. So I still got a few stragglers. And what I tell them is, every day you get to start over with me. And once you realize that, your life will get better, because it's not to get you gotcha. I'm not processing what you did yesterday, because I have to move forward. And I will also be held accountable if I participate in your shenanigans. Help me help you. And so I've had a couple of staff members, huff and puff, and then they'll come back and say, "You're right, I apologize." And it's not even about the apology for me. It's about the behaviors that follow. So
that's real good. That's really good. Listen, y'all, these are leadership gems coming straight from and direct from the testimony of Dr. Cece. Like, this is real life stuff. And Dr. Cece is a spring chicken. So she has learned a lot, and she's in the midst of still growing, and she will learn more. But the fact that she is here and she's opened her heart because God gave her the mandate to release this thing, and he ordained how she had to go and do it, and he gave her all the provisions she needed. So this is not just a book for her to say, "Hey, I'm an author." She was an author a couple months ago. This was something that God put in her years ago. And that last assignment that she released, which was an amazing book around literacy. If y'all don't have that one, you need to get that one too. That's one that every home and school needs as well. But this one was ordained for such a time as this, leading during a pandemic from someone who shares how they have grown from the beginning 15 years ago, how they failed forward, and how these tenets of a leader show up in everyday life. The link is pinned on Facebook. Click the link. Go get the book. This is not again, this is a tool. So we so grateful for everyone who's joining us. Hey, to all of our DTech Tag family. I saw Tatiana come in here too. Well, she didn't put anything here, but I saw her. Keishla is here. Hey, Keishla. Hey. Yeah, we have a lot of people coming through. Y'all support her. Share this broadcast. Share the link to the book. This is a must have for no other reason but for our own journeys. Because I know I've been in spaces as a leader where that book could have shown enough helped me. If I had that little tool to go to and pull out and say a prayer, look at those reflection questions. Because if you're just joining, she shared how the book was constructed. It is the A, B, C, D, down to Z. Each letter has a word that is from her heart that she shares a personal testimony around, as well as a prayer that God released through her around that leadership tenet and what's important about it, and reflection questions for you to sit and ask that question to yourself. To do some introspection, right? To see where you are, to see maybe what it is you need to do. This is a tool to help many leaders to just stop and pause. Stop and pause.
And I super, super appreciate that. And for those of you that have the Amazon link, if you have Kindle Unlimited, I read a book a day that are not related to the ABCs. But I read a book a day on my Kindle. And so if you have Kindle Unlimited, please download the book because it's free for you. And that's another thing. I'm so passionate about this work. It's not about the money, y'all. It's literally about me just sharing my journey because I'm a firm believer that you don't have to experience everything to learn from it. So if I can help anybody or one person to not make a mistake that I've made, because the book is very transparent. I talk about my I won't say a failed marriage because it was necessary, but I will say I talked about how I transitioned out of a marriage. So for me, please share. I have shout out to Chanel. She bought it for her whole leadership team. Wow. And so now that's something to think about because she's a leader in multiple spaces, but she bought it for her leadership with her primary role. And so just imagine how that can be received and the impact that it can make from the top down, because all of us are leaders in our own right, but some of us work in spaces where there's a leader above us, right? And so that's my hope for this book, just that you learn something. And please, again, if you have Kindle on Amazon, please download the book. It is free for you. I said the money wasn't the biggest part. I just need people to get the information out and also give me feedback. Make comments. Give us 5 stars if you believe it's 5-star worthy. If not, just message me first before you post. No, I'm just joking. But share with me so that, because there will be more ABCs. I have about 4 more that I've already started to scribe out. I don't intend for it to take 3 years to get those out, but I also don't intend to move until I'm told. And so I'm getting more in tune. One of my biggest areas of improvement with my faith was listening to God. How do I know that I'm listening to God? How do I know that it's Him talking to me? And somebody said when it's something you wouldn't normally think or you wouldn't normally say, but I needed more. And so for me, what I learned over the last couple of months, one of my friends said to me, he said, "Do you know how many people just wake up and get on social media?" He said they don't even hit God with a thank you, God, or thank you, Allah. They just get up and get on social media. And so I pray. Like pray till I cry, get in the closet. My mom is firm on getting in the closet, close the door and pray. I got that type of mama. But what I learned was I wasn't praying like I should have been praying or when I needed to have been praying. And so what did God do? So now whether I have an alarm set or not, at 4:30, I'm up. And what I do now is every time I'm awakened early, and people know me, know that I'm not a morning person at all. So now what I do is I pray. and then count down from 100. Like, God, can you please let me go back to sleep? I think I said what I was supposed to say. Now, if I want to tell me again so I can hurry up and tell you, because I just want to go back to sleep. Um, but that's really me. And so now it's a habit. So now I'm not bothered. I'm not upset that I'm up. It's just like, God, what is it that you need me to hear from you? And sometimes I'm just laying there for an hour. And that's fine, because maybe I needed to still myself.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm getting comfortable with the silence. I'm getting comfortable with seeking something that may not be given to me. I've not always had things given to me, but the naysayers, they may say it was the easy process, not knowing the internal battles, not knowing what that looks like. And that's what the ABCs are. It literally tells you, like, the scriptures are rooted in effective leadership practices. I haven't heard one person mention grace and grind and leadership when I go to professional development, but I had to be very creative in case I have to present to a school district and I'm receiving all of that. Or an organization. I want to make sure that I'm able to share the gift that was given to me the way that God saw fit. Because see, at this point, it's not about me. Because if it was about me, I would have had a couple of different letters in here. I'm just being super, super honest. He's not through with me, y'all. That's why I got to write some more books and just sit down some more. But that's the thing. I had to really center myself and then step out of myself, if that makes sense. Because, like, the intentionality, I don't believe in wasting time at all. But when you're working with people that are used to doing things a certain way, you have to get them to follow you on that journey. They don't just show up there because you said it. So I had to be intentional. Like, for example, during last COVID session, last school year, we started doing for those that are from the South, we say joning, or ragging on each other. We used to do that at the end of every faculty meeting. And they was like, Doc, everybody in? Because they were like, we don't want to talk about you when you miss up our evaluation. But when I tell you, nobody was safe. Like, we had a blast. Like, that was the highlight of our week, every week, just having a roast session with our colleagues. And so our first faculty meeting back yesterday, there was a lot of anxiety in schools within our district. So guess what? At the beginning of our meeting, I only scheduled the meeting to be an hour, but our meeting turned into 90 minutes because the first hour, I asked everybody to share what they're grateful for and what are they most looking forward to. And I didn't know I had so many teachers in school, marriages, babies. We were excited. One person said, I just made an A in my hardest class. Like, we were celebrating. And that's how we start our meetings, because at the end of the day, in order for you to be an effective teacher, effective leader, effective gas station worker, effective whatever, you have to be seen as a person first. So for me, I had to humanize my staff and let them know that I see you as a human first. Like, I had one teacher call me today crying. I said, okay, you better? You sure? Gave him a couple of tools, and then we had to move on from that. But the thing is, and that was in the middle of a meeting. So I try to be super responsive, but I have to work on that work-life balance, because I was still stretching myself, but I thought it was for a better need than myself.
That's
so
good. That's good. And one other thing, even when we were on Clubhouse earlier today, and when I shared with people, oh Lord, we lost Dr. Char-shenda. So hopefully she'll come back. But when we were earlier talking about her book and her release, and even on LinkedIn when she shared it, some of the comments was like, this was a perfect space right now, because you don't find many tools with the intersection of faith and leadership. A lot of leaders are not very, very open, especially when you're leading in, public schools and places where, it's not that popular to be so overt with who you are and who you serve in your faith. It's real important that this book comes out at this time, because leaders have been absolutely stressed with a lot of anxiety, with a lot of unknowns, not knowing which way to go, what to do in this pandemic. So this book being released right now is so ordained, because you have leaders who, we're faith-based leaders. They, in their heart, they're faith-based, but you're not going to hear them say that much out their mouth. Mm-hmm. But I bet you now you have more leaders that are walking boldly and confidently in their faith, because that faith has sustained them in this moment. So again, this tool is on time. Y'all, please click that link. Get it for you, get it for a friend, get it for a birthday gift. And I want y'all to right now in the comments, y'all tell Dr. CC congratulations. She not only wrote this book on a staycation on the weekend, she wrote a whole manuscript, y'all, in a weekend. And within that time, she has followed every step she needed to self-publish. So let's go ahead and congratulate that too. She self-published. Now, I was more than honored to be her coach. Lord, thank you, Jesus.
Thank you.
But she did. She did. And guess what? She has now learned that skill. Hello.
Yes, it's going on the website. I need one more person to let me do that work with them first, and it's going on the website.
There you go. So she even leading a school during a pandemic, being a mother, a community leader, a active Delta, you know, in all of her roles as a leader, she stood on her faith and she did what thus said the Lord. And God told her to write this and release it. And guess what? There will be no repercussions. There's only going to be up blessings, abundance, and overflow, because this book will touch the hearts and the lives of many. It will save many of us on many days when we're facing some of those hard times as leaders. And remember, you're not just a leader if you're leading in a school. You are a leader if you're a human being. Hello. Somebody is watching. Amen. Somebody is following you. You are modeling behavior for somebody. So y'all keep that in mind for this book. So y'all help me congratulate her. Help me congratulate her. Help me congratulate her. Get the book. Share the book. Continue to share the book. And I will share that she has made #1 for new releases in prayer books. Give us some hearts. Yes. How exciting is that? How exciting is that? In the middle of the pandemic. Hello? God is still in the blessing business. Hello? He is doing that. So, Dr. Char-shenda, anything else you want to share about your process or anything that God has shared with you to encourage the leaders on this evening? Anything?
What I will say is, you want to lead, for those of us that are believers, you have to lead spiritually well. That wasn't birthed until about 2 days ago as I'm going through this marketing, because as Dr. Craig shared, this has been a journey. Now, she's been with me the entire time, but I remember, I think maybe at least 2 or 3 times telling her it was just easier to write the book. Like, I don't want to do all the extra stuff. But in learning and going through processes with other people, it's like, in my mind, I'm one of those people, if I can see it being done, I can do it. And so for me, the biggest thing I would share for the current leaders is to lead spiritually well. Make sure that your people see the person in you. If you're an aspiring leader, make sure that you learn from the good and not so good examples. If you're a leader in your own right and you don't necessarily know what that is, continue to lead. Because see, when you're doing God's work, it will be revealed to you. It may not come to you how you expected. Because again, I just wanted to advocate for children. Like how I even led into education or led into getting a doctorate is a testimony in itself. But what I had to do was stay steadfast and know that, okay, if you were told to do it, you have to do it. Nobody asked you if you wanted to do it, right? But once you are clear about your purpose and not necessarily your position, because I have one of the things that I had to learn, one of my staff members, she's one of the greatest gifts to me in my current setting. She was the principal of the year, multiple years in education, probably almost as many years as I've been in education. And they were like, "You gonna hire her?" Absolutely. Because it's not about the position of me. I got to move the mountain. The mountain has to move. Forget I. The mountain has to move. My children deserve better. My children deserve a 5-star education. And so for me, I had to have the right people on the team. And the other thing I would say is play to the strengths of your team. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Gallup Strengths Finder, but I can't even think of my strengths right now. I'm super, super full. But connectedness and self-assurance and individualization, that's what I want to speak on. I thought individualization was about me. And that's one of my top 5. But what it says is you have a gift in identifying the strengths of other people. So for me, I came into a leadership role of about 6 leaders and I couldn't pick one. I'm a turnaround frontal, y'all. I came into a setting with 6 leaders and I couldn't choose one. And so what I had to do was a lot of watching, like listening with my eyes and my ears. It wasn't the people that were running to me that I was listening to the most. Because for me, I had to figure that out. And discernment is real. And so for me, it was like, oh, okay, Jesus, I see you, but you want me to work with her. Now,
And that's what
Jesus.
leaders do. Had to work with them with the
Uh-huh.
smack on their face, right?
Yes, absolutely. And I would go in my office and cut on. I told the storm, I'm telling y'all, I told the storm got me through. But for me, it was Isaiah 40:31. It was Psalms 23. Like, it was certain scriptures that had to anchor me, because guess what I couldn't do? One of the things I promised my supervisor when I accepted that job, I said, I'll give you 5 years. Because anybody knows me, know I'm not staying anywhere too long. That's just not a part of my spirit. But I had to sit still and commit to that. And people that know me, Dr. Craig, is laughing because I would gladly accept the job and apply for another one on the same day. And one of the things that I would do in my earlier stages of leadership, let's do the commercial break, I would write my letter of resignation within the first 90 days. Date it. And I lie to you not, one of my first leaders in the district that I currently serve, I told them, hey, I'll be out March 31st-ish. I left April 13th. So for me, I had to stop going into places about getting out of places. I had to focus on getting the job done, however long that took. Because now I'm not even married to 5 years. I'll stay forever if that's what, I'm told to do. But I had to step out of thinking it was my decision. And that was a lesson in itself. Because I thought I had all the control.
That's really good though, because you again, you just transparently shared how your mind had to shift, right? You had a mindset shift. Lady Marie said, you don't need all the answers, just faith and believe in yourself. She said, the word is your sword. Yes, Lord, the word is. That's why it's good. That's why we got to continue to be in a spaces of devotion. That's why we got to take those moments of meditation and getting in that word so that it's in your spirit man, your spirit. Because when it's in there, when it's time for it to come up, you're going to be able to, at least for me, and I'll tell you my strategy. I don't know all the scriptures by heart, but I do know when that word resonate in me, I can go to Google and I can put in that word and put scripture and it comes up, and that's what feeds me in that moment. So we have to be beings, like it has to be a lifestyle of devotion for us, especially as a leader. Leadership is not for the faint at heart.
It's not.
You cry often, maybe not in front of everybody, but you cry often.
And it's one of the loneliest jobs. It's one of the loneliest jobs. And I have on my acknowledgement page, and I couldn't acknowledge everybody, but when I tell you those people whose name made it this time, they anchor me. And it's more so of helping you when you're down. Like, you need the people around you that will build you up regardless. Tell you when you're wrong, but just because you're wrong doesn't mean they're leaving. They're just gonna tell you they're wrong and stay. And so that's the thing, like the people who pour into you in leadership. And it's not about the role. My closest friends are not educators, and they make it very clear they are not interested. Because you don't only have the kids' personalities, you have the teachers' personalities, and you have the parents' personality. Being a district, it's a lot. And what I always tell people is I am fulfilling my purpose. Like, I have to remind myself, because like I said, my first year in my current role was the hardest year in my professional career. And I couldn't leave. And so with that mindset shift, it's like, okay, this was today. I don't know what tomorrow will bring, because I can't go anywhere, right? So I had my response started to shift. And that was more powerful than anything, because it wasn't about me being right, you being wrong. It's like me fulfilling a dream. Like, is God pleased with me? Now, God, I know I wasn't supposed to say that. Please forgive me. But God, how was I supposed to say it? Because I start asking those questions. Help me help the next person. Because the cousin coming tomorrow, Jesus. And I need your help. Please and thank you. I don't want to keep getting in trouble for the same thing. And that's what I love telling people when they ask, how is this relationship? Absolutely amazing. I love my supervisor and now my current supervisor, same thing. The way that you redirect me is how far you can take me.
Say that again.
The manner in which you redirect me, I don't even know what I said, Dr. Craig. You know, y'all always do me like that.
That's that
Y'all
prophet.
always do me like that. But the way that you redirect me impacts how far you can take me. Because I love being redirected. I love for a person, and and that's kind of sort of how I try to redirect my staff. It's never this part. It's always, okay, now when was learning at its best? Now, what area do you think you can improve on? So let's talk about that. See, my response was, and I used to do that when I was working with teachers and developing their professional development plan. I said, I'm going to write down some standards that I think you should work on. And I want you to write down some standards that you think you should work on. And we're going to see what commonalities we have. And I lie to you guys, I don't lie to you guys at all. What I'm saying is, I promise y'all, the same ones I've written down were the exact same over the last 5 years. And for me, I said, so at this point, if we're agreeing on what we need to work on, you can't leave out of here mad. You got to help me help you. And so getting my teachers to understand it's not to get you gotcha. I would love for you to stay. Everybody can't stay, but I would love for you to stay. But in order for you to stay here, for my babies, they need your very best. And right now, you're not meeting me there. And so just being very, very clear about your purpose. Because if I was just fighting for a title, I would have stayed where I was and just dealt with the racism.
And the interesting part is, Dr. Cece has a couple titles. She has an EDD and a PhD. So she's double doctor. And she's still learning. And she's still sharing. And she's still pouring. And she's still humble because she is fulfilling her divine purpose, what God called her to do. And no, it doesn't look the same for us, but if we all position ourselves to get that relationship with him or whomever your higher power, you got to center yourself so that you can hear, because obedience is what yields those rewards. And I'm excited to see what God is going to release for you, because I know this has been not in vain, but like Dr. Walker, it is in your veins. Like this is coming straight from your heart, from obedience, because he told you 3 years ago, you didn't listen. But he came back to you and he made everything align so that you could get this done, because he knew it needed to come out. I know I done said that about 4 times this evening, but y'all, is everything. One thing I want to say is that you said something when you said that you knew that you couldn't leave after that first year. And in the devotion I wrote, one of my days is, it's important how you respond and react to long suffering. That's one of the devotional days. And when you said that, it jumped out at me, because guess what? You weren't responding and reacting the way God needed you to grow in other areas. So he kept taking you back to that same test. And then he put you in a space where you had to deal with you, get over you, shift your mindset, transform your heart. And now look what you said. If I have to stay here forever, I'm going to complete my divine calling. So God is well pleased, because your response and your reaction to long suffering now is different. That in itself is a well done, my good and faithful servant, right?
That's a shout.
Stuck in that space. So that's another congratulations and a hallelujah. So yes, thank you so much, Dr. This has been an amazing discussion. I thank you for being transparent and sharing your heart. I'm sure that many people will reach out to you as they get the book and they actually start living the book. Y'all don't just get the book and put it on the shelf. Okay. Get the book and do the book.
Please read it. Pick a letter first.
Something. You don't have to go A to Z. You ain't got to go in that order. Look at the table of contents, see what resonate with you, and start there. Use some of this. If you're a leader in different spaces, schools, Fortune 500 companies, corporate, nonprofit, and you have staff meetings, use some of it for inspiration. A little tip, yes, it is rooted in the word. Yes, every letter has a scripture and a prayer and reflection questions. If you are not comfortable pulling out that scripture per se, or that prayer per se, pull out the actual word, pull out the testimony if you like, and the reflection questions, and utilize
Absolutely.
these resources. Utilize what was released to help shift the people that are following you. That's what God is calling us to do in this day and time. If
Absolutely.
anybody, and this funny thing is everybody, because everybody is a leader. Just like I say, everybody's an educator. Everybody's a leader in their own respect. So it's time for us to align and be obedient to do what we have been called to do. And this book will help all of us to recenter ourselves, to get where we need to be so that we can be a more effective and efficacious leader in all of our respects. So I'm excited. Again, get the book. We're going to drop the link in the comments if you don't already have it. Dr. Char-shenda is at, I was going to share my screen to show y'all this #1 new release for prayer books. But I'm going to drop this link in here first so y'all can get it if you don't already have it. Get the book and help spread the word. So I'm just going to show you this for those that don't know. Dr. CC, you can talk while I share my screen. I'm going to share this.
Okay. Well, I was just going to say thank you guys for tuning in. We are super, super grateful for your presence. I will share, like we've said quite a few times, that I started this book 3 years ago. And what I will say is that Dr. Craig was a part of me then, and as she is now. And one thing about effective leadership is having accountability partners that care, that work on your behalf. Because literally anything Dr. Craig tells me to do, consider it done. Now, like I said, I wasn't in a mental space to finish the book back then, but I think she had me to purchase a tape recorder. And she said, so put it in your purse, and when you get a thought, just record it. And the interesting part is, Dr. Craig, I'm going to charge that up just to see what's on there, because in the space that I was in right now, I had already been divorced, but I was going through a bad breakup at that time. And so I'm almost positive that whatever is in those letters did not show up in this book. And so that's a whole nother word. So I'm excited about it. Shout out for the ABCs of leadership. I see I can't see that close to the screen, and I'm scared if I touch the screen.
I don't know, but it's #1 new release in prayer books. So in the prayer book category where she published, she is #1 for new release. So y'all continue to share to keep this book where it should be, because in this pandemic, we all got to lead, and we have to lead with our hearts, and we got to get our hearts right to be leaders. Before we go, I want to shout out the coach that helped me to self-publish and taught me much of what I know and put me in a position to be able to help others. I've helped publish a couple of anthologies, but to help Dr. CC lead her through that process. And that is Grace Marie Brown. Some of you may know Grace.
Ooh, thank you, Grace Marie Brown. I appreciate you.
Grace is my coach still. I can call Grace if I don't know anything, and she helps me through. But I'm most excited because not only did you self-publish your first solo book, you are positioned to help the kingdom, to help others self-publish their own books or whatever way God takes you with that. And with that, I will tell everyone who came on here, who will come on here, who's on here right now, remember, your story is not your story just to be your story. Revelation tells us that we overcome by our what? Testimony. And that can very well go in a book in many ways. This is Dr. CC's testimony, y'all. No, it's not an autobiography. It's not a novel. It's not written in that format. But God gave her this particular format so it could be bit by bit, chewed up, processed. You can apply it to your life and then go to another letter. But this is her testimony. Get the book, leave a review, support this wonderful, amazing, best-selling author and leader. And remember, your story is not your story just to be your story. Get to writing. Okay? Get to writing.
I appreciate that, Dr. Craig. Last plug, make sure if you have Kindle Unlimited, please download the book. It's not about the money. It's about making sure you get the message. Please, please, please. It's free. If you are a Kindle Unlimited person, I had one of my friends, I couldn't respond to her because we're on, but she was like, it's not asking me for money. Don't worry about the money, sis. Your gift will make room for you.
Yes, absolutely. And it will. And yours is making room for you. I'm excited. God bless each of you. Y'all lift Dr. Cece up in your prayers tonight, tomorrow, as she continues her grace and her grind. And God continues to release those next series of ABCs of leadership out of her. And as God continue to put her among great men and expand her territory so that we all can be better at what he called us to do and we can fulfill our divine purposes. So when we slide into him at the end of this here life, we can all hear, well done, my good, faithful servant. We love y'all. Y'all have
Thank you, Dr. Craig.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. All right, y'all.